Today we're here changing the analog clock battery on a Marlin's EL white backlit face clock. We get a lot of questions on changing the battery on this clock. There's actually two batteries on this particular clock. There's one for the backlight and one for the analog clock movement. So we're going to first go through the analog clock movement battery, and then we'll address the light issue. The light very rarely needs to have the battery changed because it's only active when you push the button, and some people push the button more than others, but you know, for the most part they don't push it enough to drain that battery dry. So it's very unlikely that that large battery needs to be changed that often, but we'll go through the steps just to show you what's going on. So here's the clock itself. Typically it's marked with a Roman numeral on the back, and that'll give you an idea of that'll give us an idea of when it was manufactured. That's what it's there for. This one is a 6. You'll see it's marked Marlin Corporation on the back. It says Marlin's in the face. If it doesn't say Marlin's in the face and it doesn't have Marlin's on the back, then it's not a Marlin's, and some of the same procedures may apply, but can't be too sure about each clock that you have. So we're going to start with removing the clock from the mount, and we're going to show you the mount here. This is the white EL face clock. We're going to start by removing the clock from the mount. This is a white face EL clock in a Talon mount. Normally this would be on the handlebars, but for the ease of demonstration, it is not on the bar, obviously. You see here's the groove where it sits on the bar. But to remove the clock from the mount, what you're going to do is underneath at the 6 o'clock position of the clock, you'll see there's a thumbnail notch. Okay, and you should not be able to easily remove the clock from the mount using your fingernails. It should be in there tight enough to where it's not going to come out while you're riding. So the easiest way to get it out of the mount is with a pocket knife. And you're not going to use the knife in a digging motion with the tip. You're going to use the side of the blade, and you're going to gently wedge it in that notch area, and then you're just going to give it a very slight twist, and you're going to expose maybe a 1/16 of an inch of the unit there, and then you'll be able to put your fingers in there, and you'll be able to remove it from the mount. Okay, so there you have the easiest way to remove it from the mount. And here's the silicone gasket that holds it in there. And you know, you want to examine that and make sure it's tight and right and doesn't need to be replaced, because when you put it back in, that's what's going to be holding it in. So make sure it's good to go. So here's our clock we're going to replace the battery on. And here's the back, what it looks like. And every Marlin clock manufactured, in the last 10 years has had this same back cover on it with the 6 notches. And you can see the notches that are opposing. We're going to use those to take the back of the clock off, and it's going to unscrew counterclockwise. You can do that a lot of different ways. Marlin's manufactures a tool. It's a little spanner key that fits in the opposing notches, and that'll spin the back of the clock off. You can also do it with a pair of needle nose pliers. If you have a nice tip on the needle nose, all you're going to do is put the tips into the opposing notches, and you're going to turn the back cover off counterclockwise. You can use a clock tool. This is something that a jeweler or a watch band person will have. It's got an adjustable jaw where the 2 pins will locate in the opposing notches and turn the back off that way. Sometimes these can be on there very tight from the factory. You can use a little drop of penetrating oil on here, let it soak in, and a lot of times that'll help you remove the cover. It's just a matter of you know, lubrication and getting it you know, easier to turn. So I'm going to use my Marlin's clock tool. Okay. So what we're going to do is put the Marlin's clock tool in the opposing notches, to take the back of the clock off. And some of the notches are deep and some of them are shallow, so you'll have to play with getting that tool in there and getting enough leverage to spin the back of the clock off. So this one was pretty tight, but managed to get it off. And it usually takes 3 or 4 revolutions to get that off of there. And now we've opened up the back of the clock. We're going to put that aside with our tool. And this is the inside of the EL clock. Now here's a large 2025 battery, and almost everybody who does not read the instructions or see the decal on the back that says there's 2 batteries in here assumes that this is the one and only battery. It is not. This is the large battery for the light mechanism, and if you change it, your clock will not run. It's 2 separate systems, and like I said, the battery here very rarely needs to be changed because the light only comes on for a few seconds when you push the button. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use, what I use is a tweezers, okay, and there's a few notches around the back side of the white module in here, and we're going to lift this white module completely out. Sometimes there is a little piece of double stick tape in there, so it takes a little jiggling, but what you don't want to do is rip it right out and affect the mechanism or the hands of the clock, because if the hands get bent or shifted, then they cross each other and the clock won't run properly. So you want to be very careful, and you want to just ease this white module up. It's going to come straight up and out. There's no connection other than maybe that little piece of tape in there. Sometimes you can grab this foam and work it out, but what I'm going to do is grab right underneath this white module, and I'm going to give it a little rocking back and forth, and then I'm going to lift it straight out. And there it goes. Comes out. You can see it's just a white plastic case that holds a circuit board and a battery. And we're going to address this a little bit later with some of the issues with the light not lighting. But right now we're just going to get right to the battery change. So here's the inside of the clock. You can see it's a very simple Japanese movement, very reliable. This battery is going to last you 12 to 15 months of continuous use. If you don't ride your motorcycle or use whatever vehicle this clock is installed in all year round, you can simply pull the stem 1 click out, which stops the movement and stops the battery from draining. So now your 12 to 15 month battery will last longer. So here's the mechanism and the battery, and you'll see it's held in place by 2 metal clips. Okay, one is somewhat movable and the other not so much. So I'm going to use this little horseshoe shape. What I'm going to do is just move it to the side very gently with my tweezers, just enough, carefully, so that I see the battery just pop up. And once that is released, I can just come in with my tweezers and remove the battery. Put that aside so you don't get it confused. We're going to grab our new battery, which is going to be a 377, and fresh battery, open it up, and we're going to reinstall it in the same fashion. We're going to put it underneath that tab that doesn't move, and then we're just going to very gently push it in and make sure that the tab that we moved goes back and covers it. I mean, we're talking a few thousandths of an inch moving this tab back and forth. Don't bend it out of shape or out of position. You don't need to roughhouse it. It's a very simple procedure. Okay? So once we have the battery installed and we've verified that the clock is now moving, we know the movement's good, we know the hands are moving, we can see that the hands cross each other properly, that we haven't damaged them while removing the light module. Okay, And I'm holding my finger on the back of the movement while I'm doing this because without that white module in there, there is some movement inside the case. So to actuate the stem, I just put my finger very gently on the back of the module. You don't want to crush it because you don't want to ruin the hands. The hands, you know, you don't want to push them into the glass, obviously. So once we've verified that the clock is indeed ticking and everything is functioning normally, we're going to go back and we're going to replace the light module. And the way we do that is at the 12 o'clock position, you'll see inside the case, there's a groove inside this case. You'll also see in a lot of cases, this green board here is the actual board that lights up when you push the button. So you'll see there's two copper contact points here, and those contact these two springs on the module, okay? So they need to be in contact. One of the most important things is these two copper springs need to be there. And you'll see I'm doing this whole operation over a microfiber towel because if one of these springs drops out, I want to be able to find it. To put the white module back in place, 12 o'clock position of the clock, you'll see there's a groove in the case. There is oftentimes a white plastic locating ring in here. You'll see it's got 3 dots on it, or 3 pins, and you'll see there's 2 pins on the bottom. If your unit doesn't have this, really what you just want to do is make sure that this green board and the 2 copper dots are equally spaced on this groove up at the top. You'll see there's a better shot of it there. There's the groove that I'm talking about in the side of the case. Here's the 3 locating pins, the 2 copper pads. So make sure they're at the 12 o'clock position, okay? Once you've done that, you're ready to install that white circuit board with the 2 springs. And you'll see that there's a tab at the top of the white module, and that tab fits into that slot, okay? And you'll see the 2 springs stick up just slightly above the case because they need to make contact with those 2 copper pads, okay? So we're going to take this very carefully and we're going to align it. I'm actually going to hold it. I'm going to turn this around here so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to hold it the same way I took it out. I'm going to hold it by that little depression, and I'm going to locate that slot at the top, put the tab in there, and I'm going to put it straight down. Now you can see it's not going in all the way, so I'm not located. So I'm just going to jimmy it around a little bit until it goes all the way in and it's seated properly, okay? I can test to see if the light works by activating the light now. And there's a lot of sunlight in here, but I think you can just barely see it going on and off now. Sometimes you have to cover it up, and there you go, you can see it lighting. So we know that the module is in place, the 2 copper springs are installed, they're contacting the 2 copper pads on the back of the face. You can see the clock's ticking away, and we're good to go. If we want to replace the 2025 battery, it's 1 screw that holds the strap to the battery on. Remove that screw, replace the battery, put the strap back in place, replace the screw. It's just that simple. But again, that has nothing to do with the analog clock. So now that we've got everything back in place and in order, and it's running and you've verified it's all good to go, now we can put the back cover back on. What you want to do on the back cover is you'll see there's a black O-ring on the back cover. This is obviously part of the feature that makes it waterproof. So you want to make sure it's in place all the way around. It's not mashed or, out of position. And then we're going to put the cover back on the back of the clock. Now we've got the back cover in place. Using our tool, We're going to put the tool in the opposing slots, just like we did to remove it. And the easiest way to get this to go on is to do a half a turn in reverse order, and you'll feel it drop in to the proper position. And then we can move clockwise forward and screw the back of the clock on. And it doesn't need to be, it's kind of like lug bolts, you know, they don't need to be super tight where you can't get it off again. There's that O-ring in there, so just snug will work. You know, it doesn't, you don't have to crank on it to make it waterproof. So there you have it. You've got the clocks ticking away, and you've got the light that be able to see comes on there. See the light on, and you can see it stays on for a few seconds, and then it goes off. And there you have the battery replacement. It's a very simple procedure. The three most common issues with this clock: people think the large battery is the only battery. It's not. There's two. You need to lift that white module out of there. Number two, one of those copper springs has become dislodged or is not contacting the circuit board or the copper pad on the light face. You know, those issues could be happening. And that could be happening either because the spring is out of position or become deformed, or the white module is not seated properly with that tab and slot at the 12 o'clock position. It's not seated, and the springs aren't coming into contact. The third issue is just the rotation of the face in relation to the springs. We talked about those 5 pins that lock into that white module on the back, and some of these units will not have that, and you have to make sure that the 2 copper pads are straddling that 12 o'clock slot position at the top so that the 2 copper springs come in contact with them. So those are the 3 biggest issues. Again, number 1, people don't realize there's 2 batteries. Number 2, the copper springs aren't making contact for some reason. Either they're out of position, out of form, or just missing, or the rotation of the face inside is not allowing the 2 copper pads to contact.